The sun was setting over Greenfield Cemetery, casting long shadows across the rows of weathered tombstones. The air carried a faint chill, hinting at the approaching autumn. Birds chirped softly in the distance, their songs blending with the rustling leaves of nearby oak trees. It was a peaceful place, one that offered solace to those who visited to pay their respects. Yet for Emily Carter, there was no peace here, only an ache that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Emily knelt by her mother's grave, her knees pressing into the damp grass. Her fingers traced the engraved words on the cold stone. Laura Carter, beloved mother and friend. Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision. She clutched a faded photograph tightly in her hand, one that showed her mother smiling brightly, her eyes full of warmth and kindness. That smile had once been enough to light up even the darkest days, but now it only reminded Emily of what she had lost. Or so everyone thought. "She's still alive," Emily whispered under her breath, her voice trembling. "I know she is." It wasn't just wishful thinking or denial. Deep inside, Emily felt it, a certainty that defied logic. Ever since her mother's disappearance 2 years ago, she had experienced moments when she could almost sense Laura's presence, as though she were standing right beside her. Sometimes, she would wake up in the middle of the night after dreaming of her mother, dreams so vivid they felt more like memories than illusions. In these dreams, Laura always said the same thing: "Don't give up hope." But hope was hard to hold on to when everything around her pointed to tragedy. The authorities had concluded that Laura drowned in the river near their home. They found her car abandoned on the bridge, its doors wide open and keys still in the ignition. A scarf belonging to her floated downstream days later. No body was ever recovered, but the evidence suggested foul play. The case eventually went cold, leaving Emily and her father to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Her father tried his best to move forward, burying himself in work and rarely speaking about Laura, but Emily couldn't let go. Every unanswered question gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night. Why did her mother leave without saying goodbye? Where did she go? And why did it feel like she was still out there somewhere waiting? As she sat there, lost in thought, Emily didn't notice the figure watching her from a short distance away. Marcus Johnson stood near a cluster of trees, his hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored coat. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, his dark skin contrasting sharply with the grayness of the evening. His sharp features softened slightly as he observed the young girl mourning at the grave. There was something about her posture, the way she clung to the photograph, that tugged at his heartstrings. Marcus had grown up in this town, though he hadn't lived here in decades. After making his fortune as a tech entrepreneur, he traveled the world, building businesses and investing in communities. But recently he'd returned to his roots, feeling a pull toward the place where he'd spent his childhood. He hadn't expected to stumble upon this scene during one of his evening walks through the cemetery. Something about Emily's grief resonated deeply with him, stirring memories of his own losses. He hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach her. Grief was a private thing, and intruding might do more harm than good. But then he noticed how young she was, barely 16, and how alone she seemed. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped forward, his footsteps crunching softly against the gravel path. "Excuse me," he said gently, stopping a few feet away. His voice was low and soothing, designed not to startle. Emily looked up, startled. For a brief second, she stared at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, before quickly wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. I'm sorry," she stammered. "Did I disturb you?" "No, not at all," Marcus replied with a small smile. "Actually, I was wondering if you're okay. You seem upset." Emily glanced back at the grave, her grip tightening around the photograph. "It's nothing," she muttered, though her tone betrayed the weight of her emotions. "Just visiting my mom." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I see. Do you mind if I sit with you for a bit? I used to come here a lot when I needed to think." For a moment, Emily considered refusing. Strangers weren't exactly trustworthy, especially ones dressed as sharply as this man. But there was something sincere in his gaze, a kindness that made her feel safe. Reluctantly, she nodded. Sure. Marcus lowered himself onto the grass beside her, careful not to get too close. You must miss her a lot, he said after a pause. Emily nodded, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. Yeah, everyone says she's gone, but... She trailed, off, biting her lip. But what? Marcus prompted softly. But I don't believe them, Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I think she's still alive. Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Why do you say that? Emily hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. It's just little things. Like sometimes I'll hear her voice in my head telling me stuff, or I'll dream about her and it feels real, you know? Like she's trying to tell me something. And then there's this photo. She held up the faded picture, pointing to her mother's smile. Look at her. Does that look like someone who's dead? Marcus studied the photograph carefully, noting the warmth radiating from Laura's expression. No, he said finally. It doesn't. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, Emily continued, her cheeks flushing slightly. But I can't shake this feeling. What if she's out there somewhere needing help? What if she didn't die? Like everyone thinks? Marcus leaned back, considering her words. He'd heard stories like this before, people holding on to hope despite overwhelming odds. As a businessman, he prided himself on being practical and level-headed. But as a human being, he understood the power of intuition. And something about Emily's conviction struck a chord within him. You know, he said after a moment, sometimes the truth isn't always what it seems. People make mistakes. Evidence gets overlooked. Maybe your gut is onto something. Emily blinked, surprised by his response. Most adults dismissed her theories outright, calling them childish fantasies. Hearing someone validate her feelings, even a complete stranger, was unexpected and oddly comforting. Do you really think so? She asked, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. I think it's worth looking into, Marcus replied. If you want, I could help you dig a little deeper. I have some resources that might be useful. Emily stared at him, unsure whether to trust him. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Marcus shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. Let's just say I've been where you are. Loss has a way of staying with you, doesn't it? If there's any chance your mom is still out there, I'd hate to see you give up without knowing for sure. His words lingered in the air, wrapping around Emily like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope, not just for herself, but for the possibility that her mother might truly be alive. Okay, she said quietly, clutching the photograph tighter. Let's find out. And with that simple agreement, a partnership began, one that neither of them could have anticipated would lead to uncovering secrets buried far deeper than either imagined. The next morning, Emily woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. She hadn't slept much the night before, her mind racing over the conversation she'd had with Marcus at the cemetery. For the first time in years, someone believed her, someone powerful too, someone who could actually do something about it. But was it too good to be true? Could Marcus really help her find answers, or would this turn out to be another dead end? She pushed those doubts aside as she got ready for school. Today felt different, like the beginning of something big. Before heading out, she tucked the faded photograph of her mother into her backpack, along with a small notebook where she'd jotted down details about Laura's disappearance over the years, just in case Marcus asked for more information. After school, Emily met Marcus at a cozy cafe downtown as they had agreed. The place smelled of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, its warm lighting creating a welcoming atmosphere. Marcus was already seated by the window, sipping from a cup while scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he saw her approach and gave her a reassuring smile. Hey, he said, gesturing for her to sit across from him. How was your day? Emily shrugged, sliding into the chair. It was okay, I just kept thinking about, everything. Marcus nodded. understanding exactly what she meant. I figured we should start by going over what you already know. Sometimes people overlook important clues because they're too close to the situation. Emily opened her notebook and began sharing fragments of her life before her mother disappeared. Laura Carter had been a nurse at Greenfield General Hospital, known for her kindness and dedication to helping others. She worked long hours but always made time for Emily, whether it was baking cookies on weekends or reading bedtime stories late into the night. Life had been simple and happy back then, or so it seemed. But things changed drastically in the months leading up to Laura's disappearance. At first, the changes were subtle. Laura started coming home later than usual, often looking tired and distracted. Then came the late-night phone calls, which she always took in hushed tones behind closed doors. When Emily asked about them, Laura brushed it off, saying it was work-related. But Emily noticed how tense her mother became whenever certain topics came up. One evening, Emily overheard part of a heated conversation between Laura and someone on the phone. Her mother sounded scared, pleading with the caller to stop whatever they were doing. The next morning, Laura left early without explaining where she was going. That wasn't unusual. She often ran errands before her shift, but this time she didn't come back. The authorities found her car abandoned on the bridge near their house days later. There were no signs of struggle, but the open doors and missing keys suggested foul play. A scarf belonging to Laura floated downstream not long after, confirming everyone's worst fears. With no body recovered, the case grew colder with each passing month. Eventually, it faded from public attention, leaving Emily and her father to cope alone. As Emily recounted these events, Marcus listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a napkin. His expression remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly when she mentioned the phone calls and Laura's sudden secrecy. "That's interesting," he said thoughtfully. "Did your mom ever mention anyone specific causing trouble at the hospital? Or maybe drop hints about why she was acting so differently?" Emily shook her head. "Not really. She tried to act normal around me like nothing was wrong. But I remember one time she told me never to trust doctors blindly. She said some of them only cared about money and power, not patients. I thought it was weird at the time, but now it sounds significant," Marcus finished for her. "People don't usually say things like that unless they've seen something troubling firsthand." He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table rhythmically. "Okay, here's what I think we should do next. First, I'll look into the original investigation, police reports, witness statements, anything that might have been missed. Second, we'll dig deeper into the hospital where your mom worked. If she uncovered something shady, there's a chance others were involved or at least knew about it." Emily nodded eagerly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. "And what about my dad? Shouldn't we tell him what we're doing?" Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I understand wanting to involve him, but based on what you've told me, he seems pretty set on moving forward. Bringing this up again might reopen old wounds. Let's focus on gathering solid evidence. First, once we have something concrete, we can bring him in." Though reluctant, Emily agreed. She trusted Marcus's judgment, especially since he seemed determined to protect her family. Besides, deep down, she feared her father wouldn't believe her either. He had spent 2 years convincing himself that Laura was gone for good. Asking him to reconsider might push him away entirely. Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into researching Laura's case. Using his connections, he gained access to sealed documents and interviewed retired detectives who had worked on the investigation. Meanwhile, Emily helped by reaching out to her mother's former colleagues under the guise of writing a school project about healthcare workers. Most responses were polite but unhelpful. However, one name kept popping up: Richard Hayes. Richard had been a pharmacist at Greenfield General around the same time Laura disappeared. According to several sources, he and Laura had been friendly, often collaborating on patient care plans. But shortly before Laura vanished, Richard abruptly quit his job and moved out of town. No one knew why, and attempts to contact him afterward proved fruitless. "This guy feels like a loose thread," Marcus said during one of their meetings. They were sitting in his spacious office, surrounded by stacks of papers and glowing computer screens. If we pull hard enough, maybe the whole story unravels. Emily frowned, chewing on her thumbnail nervously. Do you think he knows something? Like maybe he was involved? It's possible, Marcus admitted. Or maybe he saw something he shouldn't have and got spooked. Either way, we need to talk to him. Tracking down Richard wasn't easy. After leaving Greenfield, he bounced between cities, working odd jobs under different aliases, but Marcus's resources eventually led them to a small town, several states, away where Richard currently lived. Armed with addresses and background checks, Marcus and Emily prepared to confront him face to face. The drive took most of the day, giving Emily plenty of time to reflect on everything that had happened. She stared out the window, watching fields and forests blur past. Despite the uncertainty ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to the truth. Every clue, every lead, it all pointed to something bigger than she'd imagined. When they finally arrived at Richard's modest apartment building, Emily's heart pounded in her chest. What if he refused to cooperate? Worse, what if he confirmed her worst fears, that her mother was truly gone? Marcus must have sensed her anxiety because he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're just here to ask questions, he reminded her gently. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. Taking a deep breath, Emily nodded. Together, they climbed the stairs to Richard's door and knocked firmly. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a man in his mid-40s with unkempt hair and a wary expression. Up close, Richard looked older than his photos suggested, his face lined with stress and regret. Can I help you? He asked cautiously, glancing between Marcus and Emily. Marcus introduced himself, flashing a disarming smile. We're here about Laura Carter. You used to work with her, right? Richard stiffened visibly, his eyes darting toward the hallway as though expecting someone to appear. I don't know anything about that. It's been years. Years. Yes, Marcus agreed smoothly. But memories fade slower than people realize, especially when they involve someone like Laura. She was special, wasn't she? For a moment, Richard said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. Inside, the apartment was cluttered yet clean, with books and newspapers scattered across every surface. Richard motioned for them to sit on the couch while he perched nervously on the edge of an armchair. I didn't want any part of this, he began, running a hand through his thinning hair. Laura, she trusted me and I betrayed her. I should have done more to help. Emily leaned forward, her pulse quickening. What are you talking about? Helped with what? Richard hesitated, clearly torn between guilt and fear. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. Laura found out about some bad stuff happening at the hospital. Things that went beyond negligence, illegal activities involving powerful people, organ trafficking, medical fraud, cover-ups. She wanted to expose it, but she knew it would put her in danger. So she came to me asking for advice. And what did you tell her? Marcus prompted gently. I told her to stay quiet, Richard confessed, shame etched across his face. I thought if she kept her head down, everything would blow over, but she wouldn't listen. Said she couldn't live with herself knowing innocent people were suffering. One night she called me terrified. She said someone was following her, threatening her. That's the last time I heard from her. Emily's hands trembled as she processed his words. So, you think she faked her death to escape? Richard nodded slowly. That's my guess. She was smart, resourceful. If anyone could disappear without a trace. The drive back from Richard's apartment was quiet, but Emily's mind buzzed with questions. Her mother wasn't dead. She had gone into hiding to protect herself. But where was she now? Was she safe? And how could they possibly find her after 2 years of silence? Marcus seemed lost in thought too, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he navigated the winding roads leading out of town. When they finally stopped for gas at a small station, Emily broke the silence. What do we do next? She asked, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. Marcus sighed, leaning against the car door as he filled the tank. We start by thinking like your mom, he said. If she faked her death and went underground, she'd need help. People who specialize in keeping others off the grid. Emily frowned. You mean, like secret networks or something? Exactly, Marcus replied. There are organizations that assist whistleblowers, witnesses, or anyone trying to escape. Danger. Some are official, like government programs, while others operate privately. If Laura reached out to one of them, there's a chance they'll know where she is, or at least have clues. But won't those places keep secrets? Emily asked. They're not just going to tell us anything, right? Marcus smiled, faintly. No, they won't. But I'm good at asking the right questions, and sometimes people talk when they realize it's for a good cause. He paused, glancing at her. This isn't going to be easy, though. It'll take time, patience, and maybe even some luck. Emily nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. I don't care how long it takes, I just want to find her. Over the next few weeks, Marcus used every resource at his disposal to track down leads. He started by contacting journalists who specialized in exposing corruption within industries. Many of these reporters had sources embedded deep within hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and government agencies. One name kept coming up repeatedly: a man named Daniel Cruz, a former investigator turned whistleblower advocate. Daniel lived in a secluded cabin on the outskirts of a nearby city. When Marcus called him, explaining the situation, Daniel agreed to meet, but only if they came alone. The meeting was set for early Saturday morning, giving Emily and Marcus little time to prepare. On the way to Daniel's cabin, Emily couldn't stop fidgeting in her seat. She kept replaying Richard's confession in her head, imagining all the possible scenarios her mother might be facing. What if Laura was living in constant fear? What if she didn't trust anyone anymore, not even her own family? As they pulled up to the cabin, Emily felt a mix of excitement and dread. The place looked rustic yet sturdy, surrounded by tall pine trees that swayed gently in the breeze. A thin trail of smoke rose from the chimney, signaling warmth inside. Marcus knocked on the wooden door, which opened moments later to reveal a middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. You must be Marcus, Daniel said, shaking his hand firmly before turning to Emily. And you're Laura's daughter, I assume? Yes, Emily replied softly, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Do you know where my mom is? Daniel stepped aside, inviting them in. Let's sit down and talk first, he said, gesturing toward a cozy living room filled with books and maps. Once they were settled, he poured everyone cups of tea and began speaking. I've been following stories about Greenfield General for years, Daniel explained. It's no secret that hospital has ties to shady operations. Organ trafficking, illegal surgeries, you name it. When your mom disappeared, I suspected foul play, but I never had proof until now. So you think she's alive? Emily asked eagerly. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. If she managed to reach someone trustworthy, then yes, she's likely still breathing. But staying hidden comes at a cost. Trust me, it's not an easy life. Marcus leaned forward, his tone serious. Can you help us find her? Any lead? Would be useful. Daniel rubbed his temples, clearly conflicted. Look, I can't give away names or locations. It's not safe for me or the people involved. But I can guide you in the right direction. Start looking in areas where whistleblowers tend to hide. Remote cabins, rural towns, places without much surveillance. Also, check shelters or safe houses run by volunteers. Sometimes they leave hints behind, a note, a symbol, that only close friends or family would recognize. Emily scribbled notes furiously in her notebook, her heart racing. What kind of symbols? It depends on the person, Daniel said. For example, someone might draw a star or write initials in an unusual way. Your mom knew you'd come looking for her someday. She probably left breadcrumbs along the way. Armed with this new information, Marcus and Emily embarked on their search. They visited shelters, spoke with volunteers, and scoured online forums dedicated to helping people in hiding. Each day brought its share of disappointments, but also tiny glimmers of hope. At one shelter, a woman mentioned seeing someone matching Laura's description months earlier. Another volunteer recalled a patient who always carried a faded photograph, similar to the one Emily showed them. One evening, while reviewing their findings over dinner, Emily noticed something peculiar. Among the photos and notes scattered across the table, one image caught her eye. It was a drawing of a lighthouse sketched hastily on a piece of paper found at a shelter. The lighthouse looked familiar, almost identical to the one featured in the background of her mother's old photograph. "Wait," Emily said, grabbing the sketch. "This is important. I think Mom wanted me to see this." Marcus examined the drawing closely. "A lighthouse, huh? There's only one near here, the Grayson Lighthouse. It's abandoned, but maybe—" Without finishing his sentence, they grabbed their coats and headed straight for the lighthouse. The journey took nearly an hour, winding through dark, deserted roads. By the time they arrived, the moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the crumbling structure. As they approached cautiously, Emily spotted a faint light glowing from one of the upper windows. Her breath hitched. Could it really be her mother? Heart pounding, she climbed the rickety staircase, Marcus trailing close behind. When they reached the source of the light, they froze. Sitting on the floor amidst blankets and candles was Laura Carter, thinner than before, but unmistakably alive. Tears sprang to Emily's eyes as she rushed forward, throwing her arms around her mother. "Mom!" Emily sobbed, clutching her tightly. "I knew you were alive. I knew it." Laura hugged her back fiercely, her own tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave you, but I had no choice." Marcus stood quietly in the doorway, giving them space to reunite. Eventually, Laura noticed him and offered a grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing my daughter back to me." Though the reunion was emotional, it wasn't without complications. Laura explained how she had fled Greenfield with the help of a trusted friend, cutting ties with everyone she loved to protect them. Living in isolation had taken its toll, but seeing Emily again reignited her will to fight. "We can't stay here," Laura said firmly. "The people who forced me into hiding, they're still out there, and they'll stop at nothing to silence me." Marcus nodded, already formulating a plan. "Don't worry," he assured her. "I'll make sure you're safe. But first, we need to expose the truth. You've been carrying this burden alone for too long." With renewed determination, the trio vowed to work together, not just to protect Laura, but to bring justice to those responsible for her ordeal. For Emily, finding her mother was only the beginning. Now, it was time to take down the monsters hiding in plain sight. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the cracks in the old lighthouse walls, casting long streaks across the dusty floor. Laura Carter sat cross-legged on a worn blanket, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming mug of tea that Marcus had prepared. Her face was pale but resolute, and though she looked frail from years of living in hiding, her eyes burned with determination. Emily sat beside her, holding her hand as if afraid to let go again. Marcus paced slowly, his mind racing with plans. "We need to move quickly," Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. "If we're going to expose what happened at Greenfield, General, we'll need evidence, solid proof that can't be ignored." Laura nodded, her voice steady despite the fear lingering in her expression. "I kept records," she admitted. "Names, dates, transactions. I wrote everything down. But I didn't dare carry them with me. They're hidden somewhere safe." "Where?" Marcus asked, crouching down to meet her gaze. "In an old storage unit," Laura replied. "It's under a fake name, one no one would connect to me. If you can get there, you'll find everything you need." Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone to jot down the details. "Good. That's our first step. Once we have the documents, we'll figure out how to use them. But we have to be careful. These people play dirty and they won't hesitate to come after us." Emily listened intently, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, the lies, the threats, the years stolen from her mother. But instead, she clenched her fists and focused on staying strong for Laura. "What about Dad?" she asked suddenly. "Shouldn't we tell him? He deserves to know Mom's alive." Laura hesitated, guilt flashing across her face. "Your father, he thinks I'm gone forever. Bringing me back into his life now might destroy him, or worse, put him in danger. We can't risk involving him until this is over." "But he loves you," Emily protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "He deserves to know the truth." "No," Laura said softly, reaching out to cup her daughter's cheek. "And when the time is right, I promise we'll make things right with him. But not yet. Please trust me on this." Reluctantly, Emily nodded, though the ache in her chest grew heavier. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "She's right," he said gently. "This isn't just about reuniting your family. It's about taking down the people who did this. Until we do that, everyone connected to Laura is at risk." Later that day, Marcus drove Laura and Emily to the storage facility, keeping a close eye on their surroundings. The building was tucked away in an industrial area, far from prying eyes. Using the key Laura provided, they entered a dimly lit hallway lined with rows of metal doors. At the end of the corridor, Laura stopped in front of Unit 127 and unlocked it with trembling hands. Inside, stacks of boxes filled the small space, each labeled with cryptic codes. Laura moved swiftly, pulling open one box after another until she found what she was looking for: a weathered leather binder stuffed with papers, photographs, and handwritten notes. She handed it to Marcus, her breath catching as she flipped through its contents. "These are copies of emails between hospital executives," Laura explained. "They discuss illegal surgeries, organ trafficking, even bribes to cover up deaths. There are also bank statements showing payments made to shell companies. It's enough to bring down the entire operation." Marcus scanned the documents, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the extent of the corruption. "This is huge," he muttered. "With this kind of evidence, we could blow the lid off everything." "But how?" Emily asked, peering over his shoulder. "Who will believe us? Won't they just deny it or bury the story?" "They might try," Marcus admitted. "But that's why we're going public. We'll release the information directly to the media, reputable journalists who specialize in investigative reporting. Once the world sees this, there's no way they can sweep it under the rug." Laura nodded, though worry lingered in her eyes. "And what about protection? What happens when they realize I'm still alive?" "That's where my connections come in," Marcus said firmly. "I've worked with security teams before. I'll hire the best to keep you safe. And once the story breaks, law enforcement will step in to handle the fallout. You won't have to face this alone." Over the next few days, Marcus orchestrated a carefully planned media campaign. He reached out to trusted reporters, providing them with select pieces of evidence to verify its authenticity. One journalist, Sarah Mitchell, agreed to spearhead the investigation, promising to dig deeper while protecting Laura's identity until the right moment. Meanwhile, Marcus arranged for Laura and Emily to stay in a secure location, a secluded cabin owned by a friend who owed him a favor. As the story began to gain traction, whispers spread throughout Greenfield. People started questioning the legitimacy of the hospital's practices, and rumors circulated about high-ranking officials being involved in criminal activities. The pressure mounted, forcing those implicated to scramble for cover. Anonymous threats poured in, warning Marcus and Laura to back off. But neither of them flinched. One evening, as they gathered around a crackling fire in the cabin, Emily turned to her mother. "Do you think this will work?" she asked quietly. "Will they actually pay for what they did?" Laura smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "I believe so, sweetheart. Justice may take time, but it always finds a way." Marcus chimed in, his tone confident. "We've already set the wheels in motion. By tomorrow, Sarah's article will hit every major news outlet. After that, there's no turning back." True to his word, the exposé broke the following morning. Headlines blared across newspapers and television screens, revealing the shocking truth behind Greenfield General's operations. The article included damning evidence from Laura's files, along with testimonies from former employees too scared to speak out before. Within hours, protests erupted outside the hospital, demanding accountability. Law enforcement launched raids, arresting several top executives and doctors tied to the scandal. Among those detained was Dr. Gregory Langston, the hospital's CEO, whose name appeared repeatedly in Laura's records. As cameras captured him, being led away in handcuffs, Emily felt a surge of vindication and relief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope that justice might truly prevail. Despite the progress, dangers remained. Late one night, as Emily lay asleep in the cabin, Marcus received a call from his security team. "Someone's been asking questions," the voice on the other end warned. "They know Laura's alive." Marcus immediately woke Laura, explaining the situation. "We need to relocate tonight," he said urgently. "I'll arrange transport to a safer location." Laura nodded, grabbing a small bag of essentials. Together, they roused Emily and slipped out into the darkness, climbing into a waiting SUV. As they sped away, Emily glanced back at the cabin, wondering if they'd ever feel truly safe again. Hours later, they arrived at a new hideout, a remote farmhouse surrounded by dense woods. Exhausted but determined, Laura hugged Emily close. "We're almost there," she whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." By dawn, additional arrests had been made, including members of organized crime rings linked to the hospital's illegal activities. Public outrage reached a fever pitch, prompting lawmakers to demand reforms in healthcare regulations. Slowly, but surely, the tide was turning. In the weeks that followed, Marcus ensured Laura and Emily remained protected, coordinating with authorities to testify against those responsible. Though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing became clear. Laura's courage and Emily's unwavering belief had sparked a movement that couldn't be silenced. For the first time in 2 years, Emily felt a sense of peace. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, as a family. Months passed, and the world seemed to change around Emily, Laura, and Marcus. The scandal at Greenfield General had shaken the entire nation, exposing a web of corruption that reached far beyond the hospital's walls. Powerful figures, doctors, executives, politicians were arrested and brought to trial. Journalists worked tirelessly to uncover every detail, ensuring that no one involved could escape accountability. For Laura Carter, it was both a victory and a reminder of everything she had sacrificed. Living in hiding had taken its toll on her. Years spent running, staying silent, and living in fear had left scars that wouldn't easily fade. But now, with justice finally within reach, Laura began to rebuild. She moved into a small apartment near Emily's school, determined to create a new life for herself and her daughter. Though she still relied on security measures arranged by Marcus, she felt safer than she had in years. Every morning, as she brewed coffee and watched the sunrise through her kitchen window, she reminded herself how lucky she was to have survived and to have been reunited with Emily. Emily, too, was adjusting to their new normal. After months of uncertainty and danger, she cherished the simple moments they shared. Cooking dinner together, laughing over silly movies, or sitting quietly side by side while Laura read aloud from old books. School became easier to focus on now that her mind wasn't consumed by unanswered questions about her mother. Still, there were nights when Emily lay awake, replaying memories of the past year, the cemetery visits, the search, the fear. She knew those experiences would stay with her forever, shaping her in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. Marcus remained a constant presence in their lives, checking in regularly to ensure their safety. His wealth and influence allowed him to provide resources most people could only dream of. But what mattered most to Emily and Laura was his kindness. He didn't just help them survive, he gave them hope. Over time, Marcus grew closer to the Carters, becoming a trusted friend and mentor. Though he never sought recognition for his role in exposing the scandal, Laura often told him how grateful she was. "You've done so much for us," she said one evening during a quiet dinner at Marcus's home. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Marcus smiled warmly, shaking his head. "You don't owe me anything. Seeing justice served is reward enough." As trials began, Laura prepared to testify against those who had forced her into hiding. It wasn't an easy decision. Facing her enemies in court meant reliving the trauma. But she knew it was necessary. With Marcus's support, she worked closely with prosecutors to build a strong case, using the evidence she'd gathered, alongside testimonies from other whistleblowers. The process was exhausting, but Laura refused to back down. Every day she reminded herself why she had risked everything, to protect innocent lives and expose the truth. When the trial finally began, media coverage was relentless. News outlets broadcast updates daily, and protesters gathered outside courthouses, demanding harsh sentences for the accused. Emily attended some of the hearings, sitting beside Laura as she recounted her story. At first, Emily found it difficult to listen. Her mother's voice trembled as she described threats, intimidation, and the fear of losing her family. But as the days went on, Emily felt pride swell in her chest. Her mother was brave, not just because she had survived, but because she refused to let others suffer in silence. The verdict came weeks later, after hours of deliberation. One by one, the defendants were found guilty of crimes ranging from medical fraud to manslaughter. Sentences varied, but many faced decades behind bars. When the judge announced the final ruling, Emily squeezed Laura's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt free. With the legal battle behind them, life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Laura resumed her nursing career, this time at a smaller clinic focused on ethical practices. She poured her energy into helping patients, finding joy in making a difference without compromise. Emily threw herself into schoolwork, inspired by her mother's resilience and determination. She even joined the school newspaper, eager to learn more about investigative journalism, a field that had played such a crucial role in their journey. Marcus continued to play an active part in their lives, though his visits became less frequent as he traveled for work. Still, he stayed in touch, sending messages and calling whenever he could. On special occasions like birthdays or holidays, he made sure to be there. To Emily and Laura, he wasn't just a benefactor. He was family. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus hosted a small gathering at his house to celebrate the Carters' progress. Friends, neighbors, and a few journalists who had covered the scandal attended, bringing laughter and warmth to the cozy event. As Emily stood beside her mother, looking out at the smiling faces, she realized how much their lives had changed since that lonely day at the cemetery. "Do you think Mom would approve?" Emily asked softly, referring to Marcus's efforts to honor Laura's courage. Laura chuckled, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "She already does. Look around, sweetheart. This is proof that good can come from bad, that even in the darkest times there's always light." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. For so long she had clung to the belief that her mother was alive. Now, standing here surrounded by love and support, she understood that hope wasn't just about waiting. It was about fighting, believing, and never giving up. Years later, Emily graduated from college with honors, earning a degree in journalism. Her senior thesis, an in-depth report on healthcare reform inspired by her mother's story, earned widespread praise. As she accepted her diploma, she glanced toward the audience where Laura sat beaming with pride. Beside her, Marcus offered a thumbs up, his eyes twinkling with approval. That evening, the three of them celebrated together, reflecting on how far they'd come. Emily raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "for teaching me that truth matters, and to Marcus, for reminding us that we're stronger together." Laura wiped away a tear, smiling brightly. "And to you, Emily, for believing when no one else did." As they clinked glasses, the room filled with laughter and cheers. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful moment, one that symbolized renewal, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. In the end, their story wasn't just about survival. It was about courage, connection, and the power of standing up for what's right. And though challenges would inevitably arise in the future, Emily knew one thing for certain: as long as they had each other, they could face anything.